Hello everyone, this is Venom, and we are currently sitting at just a little bit over 2 months before Monster Hunter Wilds comes out. Now, with Wilds coming out, everybody is anticipating this game for early 2025. Everybody is ready for it to come out. The beta did excellent for that weekend. It was a free beta, and it beat a lot of games just being a beta. It did a lot better than a lot of other games that came out then. I believe we're going to be getting another beta at some point. We're getting a lot of information coming out from like IGN and some other places that got to play the game a little bit more. Capcom has gone through. They've even updated some weapons. They've updated some things. For example, the Insect Glaive got its bounce back. That was a huge thing. I'll go over a little bit more of that later. But today, I want to do a video that I've been thinking about for a while. And that is, these are the top generational changes that have either come to Monster Hunter or will be coming to Monster Hunter when Wilds comes out. Now, what do I mean by generational changes? Well, with each Monster Hunter generation, we get some additional things added in or improved on in the game. For example, new weapons being added in. Even though that's a very rare occurrence, we do occasionally get new weapons. Weapons tend to get new moves as well, so I'm going to go over some of these changes some of the ones that I like the most. Now we're going to start off with the mounts. Now technically, even Monster Hunter World didn't really have mounts you could control, but in Iceborne we did get Tail Riders. That was our first iteration of mounts. Now what Tail Riders were creatures you can call in the middle of a hunt. You could hop on them, give them a waypoint on your map, and they would go to it automatically. While you were traveling on them, you could sharpen up your weapon, you could put on mantles, you could look at the map, you could drink potions, you could do whatever you wanted to item-wise while you're traveling, and it would take you to the monster for you. Now, when Monster Hunter Rise came out, we got the Palamute system. Now, Palamutes were kind of like, and are still kind of like your Palcos. They are pets that are with you that can actually fight with you. On top of that, you're actually able to mount them and control them. So the Palamutes actually served double duty. They were really good at doing damage. They did a lot of attacks. You could give them weapons and stuff just like you could your Palcos. And on top of that, you could actually mount them. Now, come Monster Hunter Wilds, we're going to be getting something called the Sacred. It's going to be our mount for that game, and it's going to be kind of a combination of the Palamute and the Tail Riders from World. Now, I was kind of hoping that the Palamutes would be a permanent thing. Unfortunately, it does not look like it's going to be. This is going to be a Rise-specific thing. I was really hoping that we'd have Palamutes going forward. However, I get that some things are just going to be Rise only. That one is kind of disappointing. But it looks like mounts in general are going to be something we're going to have for most games, if not all games going forward. Players are used to it now, so they really like that system, and we're getting that. Now, Sacreds are, like I said, a combination between the Tail Riders and the Palamutes. They're not going to fight like the Palamutes did, but they're going to have more utility than just the Tail Riders. You see, the Tail Riders didn't really attack, they just took you where you wanted to go. Now, the Sacreds will actually serve a few different purposes. They're going to be your mount. They got a couple different modes. They got auto mode, which will take you to wherever it is you mark on your map. And then they've got kind of semi-auto mode. They will automatically move forward, and then you just kind of hit left and right and kind of steer them that way. You can stop them. It's not the same precision control as your Palamute system, as the Palamutes were, but it is still better than just the Tail Riders that kind of did their own thing. Now, on top of that, the Sacreds have a couple other functions. One, and this is probably the bigger one, is that they actually serve as the starting item box for your hunts. So in other Monster Hunter games, whenever you start a hunt, oftentimes you'd have some account items. They'd be first aid kits, rations, that kind of thing. Well, you actually get those from your Sacred now. When you start the hunt, your handler actually tell you, hey, you've got some account items or you got some items to help you with your hunt, and you hit a button on the Sacred, I think it was left or down on the D-pad, and you actually open up a pouch on the Sacred, and you can pull those items out, and that was really cool.
They've issued us supplies. Let's put them to use.
So the mount system, specifically the Sacreds, are something I am really looking forward to in Wilds. Like I said, the only real downside to it is that they don't fight. I was hoping we'd get just straight up Palamutes, but unfortunately it's going to be something Rise specific. But it does seem as though the mounts, or some kind of mount in each generation going forward, is going to be a thing. So it looks like the mount is our first set of generational changes. Now, the second change I'm looking forward to is going to be the voice lines for the main character and your Palco. Now, when I heard the Palco talk in the trailers, it threw me for a loop because I did not realize it was a Palco talking. Once I realized it was a Palco talking, I was freaking out like, this Palco speaking English, that's got to be crazy rare, like how is it doing this? And then I actually thought back to it, I'm like, you talk to your Palco all the time in game, we've just never had voice lines for your Palcos. I mean, if you go back to World and Rise, I mean, you can talk to Palcos, they speak to you all the time. But it's just nothing you've ever actually heard, so that really threw me for a loop. On top of having voice lines for the Palco, your main character will also have voice lines. Now, this could be something that's just going to be Wild specific, but I think if it turns out that this, goes pretty well, if the lines, if if it doesn't throw you too far off of the game, because you're not used to, or at least I'm not used to having a voice character for Monster Hunter, but if it fits pretty well, I see that happening going forward too. So it would be fairly weird for us to get voice lines in this game and not have them going forward. Now, Monster Hunter does have a bit of a memory problem or a bit of a programming issue as far as weapons, and oftentimes they are kind of running out of, I know in the older games they were running out of room to add new weapons, so stuff like voice lines weren't really possible. Now we don't really have that limitation, so I don't think voice lines are going to be something that are a real limitation for the game going forward. And I think right now just the weapons being programmed, new weapons, are just a pain to do, not so much something that's restricted by memory. So the voice lines for yourself and your Palico, I'm looking forward to. We've had other voice characters before, it's just not our main character. It's usually a lot of grunting and big exaggerated head nods. And again, your Palico will talk there on screen, but it's all text. So that is something else I'm looking for, is the voice lines for your protagonist and your Palico going forward.
Go! What? I can't just leave him!
I'll help. Hurry!
How did you end up in that situation back there?
Next up, that is the gathering system, specifically how easy it is to gather now. Now, for those of you that started off in World or Rise, gathering is really easy to do in those games. In the older generations, it was a massive pain in the ass, and specifically because you needed a pickaxe and a net. Now, not only did you need a pickaxe and a net, you actually had to craft them yourself, and there were typically 3 different versions of it. You had like the old ones, you had the regular one, then you had like an advanced one. I forgot exactly what they were called, but the system's gone, and I'm very, very much happy about that. Now, you actually had to have those on you when you went out to gather, and if you didn't have them on you, you could not gather from gathering points. Now, in World Onwards, you just automatically have a pickaxe, and bugs are just lying around. You don't need a net to capture bugs. In fact, if you go to World, there are just bugs lying around. You walk up to them, pick them up, and you're good to go. For mining, you've always got a pickaxe on you, so you just mine whatever you see. And the other generations, it was a pain. You had to actually buy the pickaxes. The more advanced ones, you actually had to make with match like ore and whatever else you needed. You had to craft them all up yourself. So you actually had to gather up the stuff you needed to gather. It was a massive pain. It was a huge time sink, and I'm glad they're gone. Now, one of the reasons that some of the newer games feel like they go by a bit quicker is because they got rid of a lot of that grind. And it's not necessarily that the grind being gone is bad. I'm happy that grind is gone. The monster grind's still there. So I'm happy they're keeping grind that makes sense and getting rid of the grind that was just honestly a pain in the ass. It's also a lot easier to get stuff like honey, a lot of other stuff that was a real pain to get. There were stuff like scream pods. They were a real pain in the butt to get back in the day, and you needed them to fight stuff like Plessy and Diablos. Now, Diablos wasn't as bad, but Plessy would basically spend like 80% of its time in the water if you did not have a screamer pod. And to get screamer pods, you had to go out, you had to kill the creature, hopefully get a screamer. It was such a pain. The newer games have really streamlined crafting, and I am all for it. So crafting gathering, I should say, have become much easier to do. And since I'm talking about crafting too, the addition of auto crafting to the game. Now, I don't quote me because this was not technically on my list, but since we're talking about gathering, we're going to talk about crafting too. But the addition of auto crafting certain items, you can set your game to auto craft certain items when you pick up the materials. It's really nice too, because that means you can actually craft them on the fly when you're hunting. Now, it doesn't necessarily come up too much later on in the end game. Once you're much stronger, you don't have to worry about you making a mega potion as you're running by because the creature's about to one-shot you. But it is nice in the early games to go ahead and pick it up, and hey, you've crafted up your items right then and there. You don't got to stop and craft them up. So the gathering is a huge one, and the crafting is a smaller one. But all that excess time that you needed for crafting is really nice. And then on top of that, there's one more part that kind of goes into gathering, and that is a whetstone. Again, whetstones were something that were actually a limited resource back in the day. I think you could hold 10 or 20 at a time. You actually had to go out and either buy them, and they were like super cheap from the store, so they were never really an issue. But you had to either buy them or gather them. And if you forgot them, you couldn't sharpen your weapon on a hunt. And back in the day, you couldn't do what I'm going to talk about in the next portion here. And that is restocking your items from the camp. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. So the whetstone system also not being needed anymore, or being one infinite whetstone that's given to you from the start, is very nice. Now, I just talked about it, but this is another change that came about in World, and I'm glad it stuck around in Rise, and seems like it's going to be around in Wilds, and that is being able to restock your items from the camp. Now, back in the day, again, you could not actually restock your items back in camp. You could rest in the bed there, But you had to run all the way to camp. You had to rest in the bed. So if you're out of healing potions and you needed a rest, you had to trek all the way there. You laid down, you rested. It would actually heal your poison and everything. You had to run right back out to the monster, and you may lose track of the monster back then because it didn't just show up on your map unless you had a paintball thrown at it. Now, you can now restock your items at a camp. I'm going to tell you what. The fact that you could not restock items in the original Monster Hunter games is probably the biggest thing that has influenced me as a gamer and how I play a lot of the games I do. I can't tell you how big of a deal it is in Monster Hunter World to be able to heal with your weapon or to have an armor set that automatically heals you. Having limited items really just, and this, like I said, this is probably just a me thing, but having limited healing items is something that really just color the way I play a lot of games. As soon as I see something that gives you automatic healing or like armor that gives you automatic healing, that's the first place my mind goes, is that this is awesome. I don't have to stop and heal now, or I don't have to worry about running out of healing items. So that is a huge thing. Now, there weren't necessarily a lot of times in the recent games I needed to stop and, go and restock my items. Now, against some elders and against some of the monsters I fought here recently during my challenge, the Lance Challenge, I definitely have had to restock. But for the most part, I become a better hunter and not needed to do so. But me as a young hunter, definitely having that ability to restock items at camp would have been a huge benefit. And to be honest, it still is, especially when you're fighting monsters that are unknown. You may not bring the items you need. You may not bring the weapons you need. Being able to change gear back at your camp and restock items or change items is a huge benefit that I'm really glad we have now. Now, it is canonically weird to have your entire chest of items out on a hunt with you because you're basically bringing your whole house with you. But you know what? I don't care. I love that we can do it. Now, speaking with, I just talked about it a second ago, but being able to change your armor and weapons as well, too. Being able to change your items is one thing. Being able to completely change your armor and weapons on the fly is another. Now, don't get me wrong, very few times has it actually come in handy, and unfortunately in World, the one time I could actually think that it would have come in handy, as the Elatrion fight, you weren't actually able to do so, which kind of sucked. But if you did go out and you need another set of weapons or something, or another set of armor, yeah, it's really helpful. Now, in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, the Guiding Lands is the only other time I could really think that it was really imperative that you could go and change your armor and weapons around. But again, it's a nice thing to have. Like I said, I am at the point now to where if I've got my main weapon, I know I can take on most, if not all, creatures with it, but not everybody's like that. Next one, and that is being able to gather items without a time limit. Now, in the older games, you could go out and gather items. I don't remember how it worked in Tri, but I think it worked the same way in Tri. But in the older games, before World, this is pre-World and post-World, in pre-World, there were gathering maps. You could go out and just gather and not have to worry about hunting a monster, or if a monster showed up on that map, you could hunt it, but you still had a 50-minute time limit. Now, for the most part, in those maps, they were small enough to where you could hit up all the gathering points, not just the ones you specifically needed, but you could hit them all up in under 50 minutes. But being able to go out and gather and have those items respawn to is really nice in the later games. So it's nice not having to go out, hit up the 3 honey spots, come back, go right back out, hit up the 3 honey spots, go out. It's a pain in the ass to do, and you actually had to sit there and remember when you carve in World, that's basically how you would gather up items too. You'd sit there, and you'd actually gather up the first one, cool. Gather up the next one, cool. Past that, you just, in World and Rise and onward, you just grab the item and you go, and it gives you how many are going to pop off of it. So it is nice that we can do that now. And finally, this is probably the biggest one. This is something that we're going to be getting in Wilds, and that is the ability to have 2 weapons out on a hunt. Now, it is, like I said, I think I mentioned this in another video, it is kind of diminished by the fact that we could, starting in World, go to our camps and swap weapons. However, we could not do that on the fly. So it's still amazing. It loses 1 point because we can swap at camp. That's it, just 1 point. I'd still give it a 9 out of 10 as far as, how awesome it is as a feature. Being able to go out with 2 different weapons and having 2 different fight styles is awesome. I mean, you could have one fight style for when the monster's in rage and then swap when it's not in rage. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, I'm going out with a charge blade and my lance. I can go out and just go ham with my charge blade, and when a creature gets enraged, or if I'm scared, I'm not going to take it on, or 2 come in, I can swap to my lance and get more defensive and survive a lot better. So having a couple of different play styles at your fingertips is going to be amazing. It's one I cannot wait for Wilds, and it's one that I hope actually sticks around, not just in Wilds, but going forward. All right, and that's it. Those are the generational changes that we know of so far that have either come post-World and are going to be in Wilds, or ones that I hope are going to be in Wilds. I said Wilds has got a couple that I am just really looking forward to, and that is specifically the weapon chaining and the voice lines. Those 2 are the really big ones. It's going to be weird to hear a voice line main character. It's It's not something I don't think I'm ready for. It's even going to be weird hearing the Palco talk. I think that one's going to be weirder than hearing my main character talk. Now, for me, I made my main character. He had a lot deeper voice, so that's maybe what's throwing me off. But yeah, I can't wait for it. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you all for coming by, and I will see you all on the next video.